Welcome to the Redefine Podcast.
All right, happy Thursday and happy podcast day to you. Welcome to the show if you're brand new. And of course, if you're an existing listener, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. Up here on the mountain again, down on the vineyard, I guess, relative to the house. We are down on the vineyard. Another beautiful day doing some work here on the mountain. And so I thought I'd shoot off another video. And completely aside, complete tangent, if you are listening to the podcast version of this and would like to see the video version, feel free to visit our YouTube. There's a video version for every episode. So come check it out. I'll leave the link in the show notes of this episode. All right. Today, I want to circle back on Tuesday's episode where we talked about prioritization, right? Prioritizing activities and the things that are the most important to you in terms of creating the life that you want to live, right? Because, we only get one go, right? So it's really, really super, super important. We get one go in this life. Our time is limited. Even if you think that you're going to live a very long life, which I believe I do, I will. We only have so many hours in a day. So time is limited on a day-to-day. And so I want to make sure that you are spending your time on the things that are the most important to you. In terms of creating the life that you want to live, right? Now, in that episode, I also kind of mentioned kids' activities. I brought up kids' activities, and I posed the question: do your kids, or your kid or kids, children, really need to be enrolled in all the activities that they're enrolled in, right? Your sporting league, little league type things, your recitals type things like ballet and music recitals, all those things that kids, a lot of bugs, that kids are enrolled in, do they really need to be enrolled in those things? And I brought that question up not because, I think badly of kids' activities or I wanted to criticize kids' activities. I understand and the value of those things, and I really, really love it. For kids, I love seeing children kind of explore and expand their own capabilities and really kind of get to know who they are. Airplane going by, so apologize for the background noise. It's not to disparage kids' activities, but I did pose that question to kind of raise your awareness around whether or not are the things that you're filling your time with really important to you, or are you doing them just because? Right? Are you filling your time with these activities and these things and you're prioritizing these things just because it's what people do, right? Just because it's what people do in society, it's what people do in my community. Oh, this is just what people my age do. It's just what people, parents in my community do. Are you doing things by default and just because, or are these things really important to you? Now, of course, this can apply to so many more things than just kids' activities. Again, I fully, appreciate and understand the value of kids' activities. But really, the point is, how many of the things how much of what you're doing on a day to day, and how much of what you have filled your time with are really things that are very, very important to you and matter to you and are helping create the life that you want to live? Or are those things that you're just doing just because, right? By default, again, because of society, because of community, because of this is just what people do my age, right? So really, really raise your awareness and be conscious of these things, and that's part of having this conversation with yourself is raising that awareness, right? Really, really raising that awareness, and then decide what's important to you, regardless of what society or what culture tells you needs to be important. Right? Decide it for yourself. Consciously decide it for yourself, so that you can intentionally and purposefully create your own life, as opposed to, experiencing a life that's created by default. It's super, super important, and that's why definitions are important, right? You get to define, the life that you want to live. You get to define who you are, and so that's what this podcast is all about. As opposed to having definitions that are just by default, right? And just because. To continue the conversation, then, definitions are for sure two-sided blade, right? Two-sided blade. They are needed, but they can also hinder, right? They are needed, of course. Again, we need definitions in order to define ourselves define the lives that we want to live. We need those definitions, but also understand that definitions inherently constrain, right? Definitions inherently box things in and kind of limits things to those very specific definitions. So, number one, be willing, don't be attached to a definition wholeheartedly, right? Be willing to understand that definitions evolve and change, right? They're not concrete. Even outside of your own head, outside of your own mind, definition of one thing can be completely a different definition for another person, right? So definitions only exist for you, and they are not concrete. They are ever changing. Especially as you travel through your own life, right? Through your own life journey, things are going to change for you. Your sensibilities, things that you're going to want, like how you want to live. Those things will evolve and will change. So you have to be willing to evolve and change those definitions. Again, they're not concrete. And the second thing is they're only for you, right? I kind of mentioned that because they don't live anywhere else outside your head. The definitions are not universal. They're only for you. And so make sure you're not imposing and enforcing those definitions on other people, because number one, it's impossible. And number two, it's not really fair. It's right. It's not really fair. Again, definitions by nature are limiting and constrain and box people in. And so if you are unwilling to see beyond your own definition, and especially if you're trying to impose that definition on other people, you miss out on potentially getting to know the deeper individual, and then therefore expanding your own definitions, right? I know we live in a very polarized world right now, especially here in the U.S. We're in an election cycle. There's a presidential election happening in a few months, and it's very polarized, right? Politics is polarized around the world. It's polarized, right? With politics, get beyond that, because the definitions that politics encourages us to hold and therefore enforce are only for their benefit, right? It's only for their benefit to divide and separate, to create fear. And that's why you really have to be careful and be aware of your definitions and know that if you hold too tightly to them, and if you don't know that they're fluid, and if you believe that they're concrete, they can be used against you. They can be used to create fear. They can be used to create anger and hatred. They can be used against you to get you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do, right? And again, you end up filling your time with things that ultimately don't matter to the life, in terms of the life that you want to live, because you've allowed other people to manipulate your definition. So you have to be conscious of these definitions, right? And be aware that definitions themselves are needed, but they're not universal, and they're not concrete, and they're not for anybody else but you, right? That's the message that I wanted to leave you today. Next episode on Tuesday next week, we'll talk more about prioritization. Just from a output and productivity standpoint, but I wanted to have this bigger conversation around definitions today. So hopefully that will carry you through the rest of the week, and of course through the weekend. Have an amazing weekend. Enjoy these last few weekends of summer, at least here in the northern hemisphere. And we'll catch you next Tuesday with a fresh new one. So until then, be well, be safe. We'll see you in the next episode.